Good evening and welcome to the 43rd edition of SEC Live from yours truly, Jackson Johnson, Tucker Harlan, Andrew Miller, as we are joined by the one and only himself, Tyler Head, the host of The Extra Point on 1075 The Game, your leading radio show on Columbia, South Carolina. Give him a follow on Tyler Head 18 as we'll be going over quite a lot about South Carolina baseball and South Carolina football, much more. And let me tell you something, folks, you're going to be in for a wild ride and a good time for a long time, all right here on SEC Live. Gentlemen, how you doing tonight?
Doing well.
Doing good.
Fantastic.
Oh, fantastic. We got ourselves a fun ride all right here on SEC at the Voice of College Football. But before we get the questions started tonight, gentlemen, I got some questions. What's on your Easter list for this year?
Jackson kicking the promos early. I think Voice of College Football merch would be fantastic.
Oh, man. Which one? That'd be the question there, because there's so much. Because you got your dad hats, your trucker hats, the T-shirts, the polos, the heavyweight T-shirt, the coffee cups. We've got it all right here. May I suggest some South Carolina merch? Like a South Carolina game day mug, a tumbler, a can cooler, or an Alabama one. Tennessee. We don't have Mississippi State yet, but we'll get there. We will get there. Sometimes I feel like Mississippi State's like the unwanted child of the SEC, but
thanks for that. I appreciate it.
But I won't pick at them too much. But in the meantime, we got ourselves a wild show tonight. Tucker, you got some questions for Tyler. Let's start with your questions.
Yeah, so Tyler, thanks so much for joining us tonight here to talk a little bit about the Paul Mainieri situation at South Carolina. Not just Paul Mainieri, but there's all kinds of interesting stuff, not in a good way, interesting stuff going on at South Carolina. Of course, South Carolina fired Paul Mainieri this past weekend after the, 22-6, 22-4 loss to Arkansas? Okay.
They went for 2.
Oh my God.
They did go for 2. That's important. Yes, they got pummeled by Arkansas on Friday night, and Jeremiah Donati says enough is enough. They fire him from his post after not even a year and a half there, basically. I think many of us at the time were thinking to ourselves, this is not going to go well. I remember specifically, I was doing radio at the time in Knoxville. I think this broke during one of my shows, and I was just thinking to myself, what are they doing? So with all that in mind, Tyler, what was the whole hiring process like for Paul Mainieri when he got the job at South Carolina?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you guys for having me. And I've been working at this radio station now for almost 4 years. So this is the first coach that I've seen the entire cycle of from beginning to end. So it's definitely something I have full perspective on. So to rewind, back in 2024, Mark Kingston was the head coach at South Carolina. They went 13-17 in SEC play. They had made the Raleigh Regional. I think they were the 3 seed, got bounced from that, eliminated from the postseason. And we kind of already knew heading into that postseason that Kingston was kind of on thin ice, weren't able to advance out of the regional after getting to a super the year before. They fire him that Monday, and then we got a coaching search on our hands. And there were a ton of names that were getting thrown out there. Cliff Godwin at ECU, Walters at Wake Forest, Landon Powell was a former Gamecock that's doing a lot of good things at North Greenville at Division II. And we were talking a lot about those names, for about a week or so as the coaching search was going on. And then all of a sudden, Paul Mainieri's name pops out of nowhere because he'd been retired for 3 years and didn't seem like he had any interest in getting back in coaching, at least had not publicly acknowledged that. But Ray Tanner, who was the athletic director at that point in time, of course, legendary South Carolina baseball coach that won them a couple national championships back in 2010 and 2011, had apparently called Mainieri to inquire about another candidate that Mainieri knew, and they talked for an hour or so. And at some point in the conversation, Ray Tanner was like, hey, you want to just come take this job instead? And Mainieri's like, okay, sure. And of course, he's a guy that had the pedigree of going to Omaha, won a national championship with LSU himself. And all those things check the boxes of what I think this fan base is looking for, because Mark Kingston, little underwhelming hire. I mean, he had been at Illinois State and South Florida, and he'd made some regionals, but not done anything crazy, and obviously didn't live up to the expectations. when he got to South Carolina. But here's a guy that knows what it's like to take a team to the very top that, seemingly could do the job, because Carolina wasn't in a bad place. And he even said that in his intro press conference, like, hey, this isn't a tear down rebuild. We just need to take a good program and make them elite again. So because concerns were about his age, obviously, because I believe was 67 when he took the job. And we knew he wasn't going to be on it for a long time. But I was optimistic. I'm like, again, this guy knows ball. We didn't think the 3-year gap out of the game was that big of a deal, even though a lot had changed in college sports since he had retired at the end of 2021. But I think most of us were pretty optimistic about it. And he said all the right things, seemed to win the press conference. And then we waited, 7-8 months until the season started. And then things just kind of went sideways after that.
Okay, well, so building off that, I mean, obviously we can look at the results on the field, and they weren't winning. But I mean, what were the specific things, if you can boil it down, that did in Mainieri's tenure?
So there was actually a really good in-depth piece from John Whittle of thebigspur.com, who has covered this baseball program probably longer than any of us have been alive at this point in time. He's seen a lot of highs and most recently lows with Carolina baseball. So he's as plugged in as anybody. And after the season ended last year, where they went 6-24, which is their worst record since joining the SEC, they had like the worst batting average in the SEC, worst ERA in program history. Like a lot of things went wrong. He published a piece kind of getting some inside information out about what was going on behind the scenes. There was mistreatment of players. There was, I think it was, they went on the road and lost to Kentucky. He made the team change in the parking lot, which was really weird. There was, he didn't like the team celebrating, didn't like them having fun. There was also, because Carolina is a pretty well-funded baseball program that has all the technology, TrackMan, and all that kind of stuff that every program around the country uses. But Mainieri, being a very old school guy, didn't want to use that stuff because he thought his old school way was the right way. They weren't doing as much conditioning as they'd done the year before, weren't working out the same way. And all these things kind of culminated and into what last season was. And when that piece came out, it kind of answered a lot of the questions that we had. And nothing happened to Mainieri at that point in time. We didn't really hear from him for a couple months because it was the off season, and, went out there in the transfer portal and got a bunch of new players. And we're like, okay, well, maybe he's changed his ways. Maybe he's learned from his mistakes last year. Let's hope 2026 is better. And well, we obviously know that it got even worse and was trending towards being a worse season prior to him fired, mutually parting ways, however you want to describe it on Saturday.
Oh, that was basically like a nice way of saying he got bounced out the building.
Yeah, pretty much. And look, Mainieri, again, he's going to be a Hall of Famer. What happened at Carolina is not going to change that. So I think they did give him the due respect of like, hey, man, you're a legend of this game. We won't fire you, but we don't want you to coach either. Let's just agree this isn't working. You walk away. We'll implement Monty Lee as the interim head coach, and we'll just both move in different directions. And that's essentially what they did.
How irritated is the fan base by Ray Tanner right now because of all this? Because he essentially hired his buddy, and then retired not long after he hired his buddy. And now there's this, I don't know what the relationship was like between Mainieri and Donati, but I can't imagine it went well between the two of them if this is the result.
Yeah, it's very interesting you asked that because, again, Ray Tanner, legendary baseball coach for the national championships, it's a debate between him and Don Staley as the greatest coaches in the history of this school, and rightfully so, given what they were able to do for both those programs. But Ray Tanner as the AD is a very different story in a lot of this fans' opinions, and I see where they're coming from because a lot of his hires just quite frankly haven't worked. And you look at the state of men's sports right now, where football went 4-8. Lamont Paris's basketball team is coming off back-to-back horrible seasons after making the tournament 2 years ago, and now we've already had to move on from Paul Mainieri. All those hires having been made by Ray Tanner. Again, nobody doubts his accolades as a coach, but the athletic director era was a little bit of a different story. He hired Mainieri in June of 24, and I think it was August or September that year when he announced, it was September that year because it was right before the LSU game that week that he announced that he was going to be stepping away as AD at the end of that year. We didn't know Donati was going to take over. We later found out he was going to be the new AD starting in 2025. So I'm sure, Ray Tanner knew this was going to be his last hire. And again, the baseball program is his baby. He built it up to be the national powerhouse that it was, and he wanted to make a hire that he thought was going to get it back on track, and it just completely went in the wrong direction.
What are some of the thoughts on the comments coming out of from Paul Mainieri about fan base being impatient? What do you take away from that?
Oh yeah, we talked about that ad nauseum today. We actually had Koki Riley, who wrote the article for NOLA.com, on our show earlier on this morning. And I think one thing that was very telling was the fact that his first comments about his time here were to a New Orleans publication, right? We had people here locally. Jordan Cave, the state newspaper, even acknowledged that he reached out to Mainieri in the wake of his, firing, resignation, whatever you want to call it, to try and get some comments. Mainieri either just didn't answer him or refused. I'm not sure specifically what happened there, but Koki Riley, who knew him from his time at LSU before, got this insight from him to where he basically, and I gave Mainieri a lot of credit, because that's another thing I didn't talk about a moment ago. A lot of what he did last year was throwing his players under the bus, not taking accountability. Hey, it's their fault. It's their fault. I'm a legendary coach. I don't have the players to work with. And in his resignation statement on Saturday, I gave him a lot of credit, because he did acknowledge, like, hey, they gave me the resources. I wasn't able to get the job done. I didn't do well enough to succeed at South Carolina. And if that's the last thing he ever said about the Carolina job, then I think most people could have accepted that and said, okay, well, at least he acknowledged it on his way out. But then you read this article from NOLA.com, and he's talking about, well, the fan base, they weren't patient enough. The media was out to get me. These 80 games didn't mean anything in the grand scheme of my career, and just seemingly burning every single bridge on his way out. I don't think he was ever going to come back to Columbia anyway, but I really don't think he's going to now, because I don't think he'd safely walk around the streets of the city without getting jumped by somebody for what he did to the baseball program, and then having the audacity to say those kind of things on the way out.
Yeah, so South Carolina fans are impatient and Tennessee fans are nasty, according to Paul Mainieri. The Tennessee fans may have actually been nasty. And I, for the record, I think the South Carolina fans are impatient, but
Sure,
because he made them impatient.
Well, and I go back to his introductory press conference, and we played the clip the other day that I went back and found, where he said, hey, this isn't a 5-year plan. I'm going to come in here and we're going to have success right away. So he was telling you right then and there, I think I can get this team to where you want them to be really, really quickly. And if he would have gone out there in 2025 and had the exact same record in conference play as Kingston in his final year at 13-17, and they would have made regional and got bounced, it was a 3-seed or whatever, then nobody would have been upset about it. It's like, okay, you treaded water. We'll try and be better next year. But the fact that you were so much worse in the wrong direction, that's what got the fan base upset. And then you have these comments on top of that. He didn't treat the Clemson series last year with the respect that this fan base thinks it deserves. And that's kind of where the ball started rolling. Then just everything went sideways in conference play. And people weren't like overly optimistic going into this year. And then you start losing games to Northern Kentucky and Army, the Citadel, Queens. It all snowballed up into that disaster on Friday night at 22-6. And I listened to his post-game press conference after that. He just sounded done, right? He just sounded like a guy that had been beaten down. His heart wasn't in it anymore. I didn't know he was going to be gone by the next morning, but it made sense.
I guess for South Carolina this year, you're probably at this point, what are you playing for the rest of the way? I will say, I've seen Mississippi State in 2018 had a team that got off to a horrific start, fired the coach after the opening weekend because he was having some inappropriate relationships that were affecting his ability to coach.
Right.
And that team managed to actually turn it around and get to a regional. I get it. South Carolina's probably taken a few more tough losses for the resume. I mean, what are you looking for the rest of the way for this team?
Well, it's interesting because Monty Lee is now taken over. He was a longtime assistant under Ray Tanner, coached at Clemson for a few years, got those teams to regional. So he's capable of being a head coach. He's been in charge of the hitting the past couple of years, even going back to the Kingston era. It did seem like he and Monty Lee really butted heads on philosophy, which may have been a reason why this team struggled so much on offense. But, we get the news Saturday morning, early Saturday afternoon about Mainieri being gone. Monty Lee takes over, and you immediately kind of see a difference in the way that the team played. They should have won the second game on Saturday, save for KJ Scobie airmailing a ball that would have been the third out in the ninth inning. And they go out there and win the game on Sunday, their first conference win of the season, the first time they won a Sunday conference game in almost 2 years, believe it or not. But they're having fun. They're playing loose. And look, I don't think anybody doubted the talent on this team. It just seemed like they weren't being used to their full potential. And I don't know if Monty Lee is going to be able to do that. We saw just last night when they played North Carolina and Charlotte, they got beat pretty badly, 9-1, gave up 6 runs in the bottom of the 7th inning. So there are still some things to work on, but it's so interesting that Mainieri leaves so early because you're only 2 series into conference play. You still got 24 more games to go after this. And yeah, you are realistically going to have to win somewhere in the neighborhood of 12 to 13 of those games to put yourself in even consideration for the postseason, which is a tall task. But I kind of feel like it's almost like the season started over because you have a new guy in charge, new energy with the team. The players are excited. Again, will they do anything to get themselves to the postseason? I don't know. I think this weekend at Georgia is going to tell us a lot because that's a team that can tear the cover off the ball and hit a lot of home runs, and that could be a disaster for South Carolina with the way some of the pitching's been this year. But if they can go out there and manage to win 2 out of 3 in Athens, then we might have something here. But again, it almost kind of feels like we started the season over this weekend, and now we're only kind of 3 games in.
So who would be like the next coaching candidates for South Carolina baseball, and how does Monty Lee become the next head coach permanently? Like, do we see like a huge winning streak needing to happen in order for Lee to be the next head coach, or do we need to look elsewhere in Columbia?
So again, by taking over, not even at the halfway point of the season, Monty Lee's going to have his opportunity. If they somehow, end up with a 16-14 conference record and they're playing in a regional somewhere, that's a strong case. Again, he's a former head coach at Clemson, so it wouldn't be his first rodeo there. But there's a lot of candidates that are obviously popping up. Kevin Schnall right down the road at Coastal Carolina is a very popular one, and named a lot of people have been bringing up. Again, I kind of go back to some of the names that we were talking about a couple years ago with Walters at Wake Forest, Cliff Godwin at ECU, just names of guys that have built programs up, taken programs to Omaha, that kind of thing, because that's kind of what the standard and expectation for South Carolina is. There's also assistants. I brought up Landon Powell earlier, who's a former player that this fan base really latches onto when we have these conversations because of his ties to the school. I'm weary on that because he's only coached at the D2 level. That's a pretty significant jump up to the SEC, but it's kind of the four names we were talking about, again, only 2 years ago. But the weird thing is, like with the Kingston firing, within about a week or so, Mainieri was hired, right? Because everybody was wrapping up their seasons. People get eliminated from tournaments, and we can make this hire pretty quickly. It's March 25th. We still got a long way to go this year. So even candidates that you're interested in are focused on their own teams. So it's not like we're going to name a head coach next week. I think it's one of those things that we'll periodically keep talking about over the next handful of weeks and months as the Monty Lee experiment unfolds. And then sometime in early to mid-June, we'll probably have our answer on who that's going to be. But again, that's almost 3 months from now. It's just it's a unique situation. You don't see a lot. It's very much parallel to when Steve Spurrier walked away from the football team about halfway through the season in 2015, when he realized, hey, I just don't got it anymore. They handed over the reins to Sean Elliott, who's now back as the tight ends coach, funny enough. And then they obviously would go on to hire Will Muschamp, and we know what happened from there. But yeah, it's rare to have these kind of moves happen this early in a baseball season, especially in the middle of a series like it happened over the weekend. So we're just kind of in wait and see mode for the time being, I guess.
Well, unfortunately, I'm looking around and at the South Carolina athletics department, and baseball coaches may not be the only ones on the way out here soon. Again, I can't tell what's going on with Shane Beamer year to year, because it goes from, a new high to a new low each year with him seemingly. And then you're entering for the third year in a row, a pivotal year for Lamont Paris. What are they? A combined 14-69 between football, basketball, and baseball in SEC play. That was my unofficial count the other day. Yeah, since 2025.
That sounds about right, and obviously that's very, very bad. But yeah, you're probably not far off on that.
Okay, so I was going to ask, because there's not much of a buyout, but when you're considering all of these other factors, how costly is it really?
Yeah, and we're still getting the details on like exactly how this is going to work, because he has a buyout if he gets fired, he has a buyout if he resigns, and then there's kind of an in-between on if both sides agree to part ways, and I haven't seen anything specific on that just yet. I know, again, Jordan Cave, the state newspaper, was writing about it the other day, so they might get off on kind of the cheaper end because it is both parties kind of agreeing to go in different directions here. But it's interesting you bring that up, because it was only about 2 weeks ago that Lamont Paris got the vote of confidence to come back for another year. That upset the fan base a lot because, of course, the past 2 seasons have been awful after their tournament appearance a couple of years ago. And one of the narratives of that we believe is, hey, you've got a baseball coach that's in the wrong direction. It's a make or break year for Shane Beamer. You might have bigger fish to fry than the basketball program. And understand this, the tier ranking for men's sports at Carolina is football, baseball, and then men's basketball. So it's almost like you could be willing to bite the bullet on men's basketball, maybe not having another great year. They are going to allocate more resources to Lamont Paris, but you knew decisions were going to have to be made about baseball and potentially football if they don't, improve this upcoming year by a significant margin, to where you're willing to say, all right, Lamont, we'll give you another year because we might have to make moves on these other two guys, pay those buyouts, buy out the staffs and all that kind of stuff. And, I know we love to talk about money and rev sharing and NIL, like money just grows on trees, but it's got to come from somewhere. And nobody's ever accused Carolina of being the richest school in the SEC by any means.
Well, and something we've noticed through the Shane Beamer era is when you see everybody talking about South Carolina as the underdog contender in the SEC, they fall short of it, way short of it. But when no one is talking about them or saying a word about them in the preseason, they basically have a say in who gets in the playoffs or the SEC title, like they did in 2024. Or like last season in 2025, all we heard was South Carolina, South Carolina, South Carolina. They come up short for a ball game. And now this season, we're not hearing anything about South Carolina except bad things. So that makes me feel like we could see a surprise season from the Gamecocks, especially when you see the over-under win total by FanDuel as 6.5 wins. And I don't know why, but I feel like there's going to be 8 or 9 wins. I'm not saying they will, but it's just like they could, and it would not surprise me.
It is a weird phenomenon that when Beamer teams are expected to do something, they don't, and when they're not, they do. Again, you got to correct that at some point, because you can't just have good year, bad year, good year, bad year, good year, bad year. They've made a lot of changes this offseason. I'll give them that. Obviously, we'll see what happens in a couple months when the season starts. But yeah, I mean, this is a make or break year for Beamer. We've debated, like, okay, what's your win total got to be to keep this going? I think it's lower than some people might think it is. Just again, kind of given the buyout and the money and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, this is the men's sports, as Tucker outlined there a moment ago, not in a good place right now. Again, a lot of people put that pretty squarely on, Ray Tanner and some of the decisions that he's made over the years. He also riled up the fan base about a month ago when asked about that, and he said, it's cyclical. It's like, no, man, this is pretty bad. Most programs don't deal with this across the board for men's sports the way Carolina is right now.
And honestly, and this would have been like unthinkable in like 2021, but it's like Shane Beamer sounds like he's in a cooler seat compared to like Dabo Swinney like these days. Like it just sounds kind of crazy, but it's like you see Dabo where he was basically just spanking Will Muschamp, whereas he only had 2 wins against Steve Spurrier in 2008 on November 29th on ESPN2 at noon Eastern time, 11 a.m. Central time, and on November 29th, 2014, which there again was on 11 a.m. Central time, noon Eastern time on ESPN.
Yeah.
But you got the 2021 win, 2023 win, and I believe that there was a law. Yep, Clemson won last year, but it's just like 2 losses to Shane Beamer. Like it's like Dabo has spanked the bad teams of South Carolina, but he can't get it done against the good teams of South Carolina. And I feel like Shane Beamer has that working for him. Is you can fire me, but who you gonna get that's gonna get a better record against Dabo Swinney and Clemson?
Well, and especially considering the fact they've won the 2 games they played up there at Memorial Stadium in 2022 and 2024. Now, yeah, you want to start beating them on your home field because they haven't done that in a long time. And last year's game was another disaster.
Not since 2013.
Beamer has his record against Dabo Swinney is definitely interesting, and both those guys are on their own respective hot to warm seats depending on who you ask. But this definitely is a make or break season for all of men's sports. As I said, again, we know Paris is coming back. We'll figure out who the next baseball coach is, and obviously see what Beamer is able to do when the fall rolls around.
Real quick, and I just going back to baseball, and I know we're running long here.
Yeah, okay.
You mentioned a second ago with the standing of baseball at South Carolina, and I know a few days back people put out like the revenue spend, or not revenue sharing, but it was just the spending for college baseball programs, and like South Carolina was up towards the top. as you would expect much of the SEC to be. And I think I've seen rumblings like nobody ever knows the NIL rev share numbers, but I've heard rumblings that they did spend on the roster, that they've done a good job going out and getting players. Could you see this being a scenario where, you talk about basketball, maybe they're pushing that to the back burner. Football, we'll see what it is. Could this be a case if South Carolina tries to go all in and say, this is a sport we care deeply about, we want to get back to winning at the very highest level? And, not to just draw a bunch of comparisons to Mississippi State, but Mississippi State just did that with Brian O'Connor.
Yeah.
And finally saying, hey, we've said we're supposed to be a big-time program for decades and decades. We haven't always invested that way. We're going to do everything possible to go get one of the best coaches in the country. Could you see South Carolina taking a similar approach?
I definitely could. And again, like you said, the NIL numbers are things that are debated and speculated, so we don't know the specifics. I do know they spent a lot in the portal this offseason. When you look at some of the talent they brought in from around the country when it came to better hitters, better pitchers, and all that kind of stuff, on paper, it made a lot of sense that this roster should have been a lot better. Again, Mainieri just wasn't getting as much out of them. So again, he seemed to have the resources, and he acknowledged that when he put out a statement on Saturday, like, hey, they gave me what I needed to succeed. I just didn't do enough. So whoever the coach is, probably going to get paid pretty nice. I'm not going to say they're going to be the highest paid coach by any means, but I think Carolina will pony up what they need to get a good coach in here. And they're seemingly going to have the resources to go out there and spend and bring guys in, because this is a fan base that cares very deeply about baseball. And if you get a guy that people can believe in, like initially believing in Paul Mainieri 2 years ago, they'll spend what they need to spend to make sure that you're competitive. Because again, it's a program that was in a good place, that they wanted to get to a great place. And now they're kind of in that weird purgatory of like, are they bad? Are they good? Like, we'll find out how the rest of the season plays out. But, the standard here is hosting regionals, trying to make Omaha every couple of years. And they haven't done that in a while now. And again, we'll have to see what hire they end up making and how that ends up working out. But there's no doubt that they will invest what they need to be successful. Same thing with basketball. This is a state that really loves basketball. That's something that really surprised me a lot when I moved here, is how ingrained this community and this fan base is with a basketball program that hasn't had a lot of success over the years, but they're promising Lamont Paris he's going to be somewhere around that mid-range in the SEC in terms of NIL resources next year to hopefully make next season better, because guarantee you, if they only win 2 or 3 conference games again, he's definitely going to be gone next spring. So again, nobody's saying that Carolina has the most money to spend, but they are trying to make the dollars go as far as they can between the 3 major men's sports.
Well, I mean, you always got the women's basketball program. I mean, they can get another Final Four. Who knows? Another national title could be coming. 2
more wins, and that'll be the fifth Final Four in a row, I believe.
Oh yeah.
They got to go through UConn.
Oh, y'all chewed up Southern Cal like a chicken nugget, and y'all basically smoked Southern like a chimney.
It is really interesting because like women's basketball is so good here. It can be hard to talk about them in season because they're just like dominating opponents so easily. Again, I've been here for almost 4 years, and I think they've lost 8 games in my time here. And the most recent one being the SEC Women's Tournament Championship to Texas a couple weeks ago. So it doesn't happen a lot. Again, this is kind of where people like, okay, these are the games that really matter. Sweet 16, Elite 8, and obviously Final Four, hopefully coming up next weekend. But yeah, there's always that. You at least have one of the best women's basketball programs. But, this is a school that wants to see its men's sport succeed as well. Again, the baseball program has the highest standard because they've been there and done that. But football, they expect, hey, you should be around 7, 8, 9 wins, competing, obviously being in bowls every year and hopefully competing for playoff spots. And men's basketball to just be competitive enough in the SEC and enter in the tournament conversation is kind of where I think a lot of these fans expect you to be. And obviously you haven't been there the past couple of years.
Man, like April 1st, like next week, it's going to be that 9-year anniversary where South Carolina made their first and only so far in men's basketball history to the Final Four, which, I mean, it's crazy though, where it's like, it's pretty cool, but it's like, I think we can definitely see some good things happening, but we'll definitely wait and see what happens.
Yeah, we like to say that Frank Martin taking South Carolina to the Final Four is probably the single most impressive accomplishment that's ever been done at South Carolina, considering the other history of the basketball program before and after that has really done basically all of nothing. Again, they got hot at the right time and went on that run, and something people still talk about to this day. But yeah, it's been 9 years, and people just want to get back to the tournament at this point.
There we go. Well, gentlemen, any other questions we got for Tyler?
Any just generic thoughts on spring football right now in South Carolina? I know they're going into year 3 of the Lenora Sellers, Dylan Stewart, Nick Harbert magic trio right there.
Yeah, it's been an interesting spring, or really interesting offseason, because so much has changed. Obviously, they fired Mike Shula towards the end of last year because the offense was atrocious. They went out there, got Kendall Briles, which is a flashy name, a college-specific offensive coordinator that I think we're really excited about. Now, they don't have a spring game this year because they're making renovations to Williams-Brice Stadium. And not that you learn anything from a spring game, but I would like to have at least seen the bare bones of what this veer and shoot offense was going to look like. But I mean, and look, they're going through spring practice right now. The coaches are speaking during the week. Are we learning anything? Not necessarily, but there's a lot of optimism because the defense has been good, right? Like, their defense was good enough last year to keep them in a lot of those games they lost. They just couldn't fight their way out of a wet paper bag on offense to score more than 14 points usually, and that's not going to win you a lot of games in the SEC. So if the defense can replicate what they did, if special teams cannot screw up, and the offense can just be average to above average, I think this team can have a lot of success. Again, a lot of new faces coming in the transfer portal. Sellers has to get his confidence back in a lot of ways because it seemed like Shula made him overthink a lot of things. Like, hey, don't use your feet. Sit back there, wait for the things to progress. Wait for your throw opportunity to open up, where the season before he was just going out there and playing ball, using his natural athleticism and making crazy plays. So that's something that Kendall Briles is having to do, is kind of reestablish that confidence. And again, you take everything that people say this time of year with a grain of salt. They're saying all the right things. We'll see what happens. Now, you do get Kent State and Towson to start the season, so those games aren't really going to tell us anything. But it's Mississippi State in week number 3, Alabama, Kentucky right after that. So you'll get a couple games right there at the end of September that will really tell us where things stand with South Carolina and if the season's going to be better or not, because all but one of the teams that made the college football playoff from the SEC last year are on your schedule once again this year. So it does not get any easier.
Oh, yeah.
Tyler, thanks so much for taking the time. Why don't you tell everybody where we can check out your work?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at TylerHead18. I'm on 107.5 The Game in Columbia, South Carolina. We have multiple stations throughout the state. We're 100.3 out in Myrtle Beach and 95.3, I believe, or 100.3 in Florence, and I think 95.3 out in Myrtle Beach. Don't quote me on that one, but we're almost statewide. You can follow us on our YouTube channel. We live stream our shows every single day, and we're in the midst of a very interesting time with the state of all the men's sports right now. Again, we've been talking about Mainieri all week, but no, we never lack for content. That's for sure.
There you go. Tell your friends, your family, and the cashiers at Post about the magic that Tyler Head brings on the Extra Point on 1075 The Game, your radio station in Columbia, South Carolina. Give him a follow at TylerHead18 on @/Twitter. One more thing before we sign off. How you feeling about the Braves, man?
Oh, great question. Hopefully in the 30 minutes we've been talking, nobody else has gotten hurt. Because that seems to be the theme of the off season and spring training so far. I did accidentally figure out that I have Braves Vision on my TV provider because I was worried I was going to have to pay $100 for the season, but I have Spectrum cable and I was combing through the channels the other day. I'm like, oh wait, I have Braves Vision. I can actually watch them. We'll see. Again, when you start the season with so many injuries, especially at pitcher, you're not overly optimistic. Again, it's a long season. You'll get most of these guys back within April or May. It seems like, and we'll see. Again, this is a team that has looked bad in the middle of the season, turned it on, got some free agents, and won a World Series a couple years ago. So nothing's impossible. We'll see how Walt Weiss is in his first year as a manager. But there's a lot of questions for sure. But I don't know.
Just tired of those Mets and those Phillies. I don't want just down. It's like, go away, Philly. Go away, New York.
Well, we have our rivalries within the NL East, and they've gotten the better of us here as of late.
For sure. Tyler, we will definitely be seeing you later, and chop on to the Atlanta Braves. Let's go.
That's right. Appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, have a good one.
Thank you very much.
All righty. And of course, we've got some top-notch takeaways, some takes on the Voice College Football X account all right here, where you can get top-notch discussion, debate, analysis with no off season. All you got to do is give a follow to the Voice of College Football X account, and you can get top-notch takes in the world of college football. But also, you can check us out on SEC Live, not only just here on X and YouTube and on Facebook, but you can also check us out on Amazon, Spotify, Apple Podcast, and iHeartRadio. Because some of you guys that are tuning in are running errands. You got to pick up your kid from daycare. You got to pick up your kid for the babysitter. Or, you got to get something to eat, like Five Guys, or get something from Publix. Listening to us on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, and iHeartRadio is the perfect place to be on your phone, all right here. But don't be posting and driving, because that's a no-no, ladies and gentlemen. That is a no-no.
No, we brought it up earlier, but did want to make sure we shout it out. Godfather, thank you so much. You are the absolute best. Our most loyal listener, for sure. Love having you be a part of the chat. And, of course, we very much appreciate the super sticker. Thank you so much.
Oh, we appreciate very much, Godfather. We appreciate very much. But, we had some spring storylines. I wonder what's been going on in the spring for the SEC.
Yeah, I'm about to have to jump out, so I guess I'll hit one of mine real quick. So we did want to talk a little bit about just some of the biggest storylines facing SEC programs in spring practices. We have spring practices underway basically across the board. I don't know that there's anybody who hasn't started yet to this point. And, the biggest topics of discussion, and I'm sure, Jackson and Tucker, once I'm off, we're going to talk about some of the quarterback battles that we see out there. Some of the new faces entering the SEC, what we see from new coaching staffs. I wanted to have one that wasn't just all that. So that'll be my one before I skedaddle. But the Georgia Bulldogs, I feel like we're not talking about them a lot this offseason compared to a lot of years for a team that, has still won the SEC. It's still, been they've won the SEC multiple years in a row now at this point, if I believe correctly.
2 years in a row, right?
Yeah, and obviously been firmly in the mix year in, year out. And last year kind of felt like they were still somewhat under the radar in some ways. And this year, we're going to the offseason. We just have not really talked a lot about this team, which is interesting. You got your quarterback coming back from a team that easily could have gone to the playoff semifinal if not for a crazy game against Ole Miss. My big storyline with the Bulldogs, the big thing that I'm looking for, do some of these younger defensive linemen take another step forward in year two? Because we've grown accustomed to Georgia defensive line, right? Like those guys they have the absolute studs up front and being able to play dominant in the line of scrimmage, and didn't fully get that last year. They were fine in run defense, but the pass rush was kind of non-existent. I look at this Georgia team, though, like they are bringing back a lot of guys on that defensive line who played a lot last year. They were pretty young, pretty inexperienced. And you have Xavier McLeod coming back, Jordan Hall coming back. You're bringing in Amaris Williams as a transfer from Auburn, who was pretty productive last year. Does Georgia get back to playing bully ball in the trenches defensively? Even with losing C.J. Allen and Dalen Everett, I think they got good pieces returning in the back seven. So I think those parts of the defense should still be sturdy. But what prevented Georgia from being the dominant defense we're used to so frequently last year was just the defensive line was not what we expect. And they took a step back on that side of the ball. I want to see Georgia defensively. Are you going to be stronger up front on defense? Do we get back to more of what we see? And in the spring is sort of where we're going to start to get those first hints and how that group develops going into this season.
That's a good question, because I'm curious to see where that Georgia defense is going to be heading into the rest of spring practice.
Yeah, that's a team that we just expect to be dominant on the defensive end year in and year out. I mean, I look back to those 21 and 22 teams just consistently pumping out the defensive talent. Guys like, of course, Jordan Davis, Devontae Wyatt, another name that comes to mind. I should have just said the entire Eagles front seven, honestly, because that's what it is now. There's just been a mass migration from Athens to Philly in that time, but they were not as strong on that side of the football as what we're accustomed to a season ago. So I think that's what they're trying to correct this season. Absolutely what they need to correct.
All right, that'll do it for me. I will see you all next time.
There we go. Tell your friends, family, and cashiers, pubs about the magic that Andrew brings right here on SEC Live and on Mississippi State, the voice of college football, including tomorrow's edition of the Mississippi State Call-In Show, 7 p.m. Central Time on Mississippi State, the voice of college football. Let's help our guy Andrew get the 1,000 subs on that channel. Oh, man. And Godfather has a topic for us about Trent Simpson being the new assistant defensive line coach he's from Oklahoma, but he was born and raised in Alabama.
Yeah, didn't he play baseball somewhere? Am I reading that correctly?
Jacksonville State.
Okay.
Yep.
So from Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
What's the quarterback competition looking like there, Jackson, just with Alabama this year with Keelan Russell and Austin Mack?
Oh, it's still just kind of complicated between those two. You know, we'll have more of an answer on who's going to be the quarterback by the time we get to, like, say, 2 weeks before the season. But one thing to know whether you've got a quarterback as your starter or not is the key words. Like whether that the coach may not be saying it publicly. Oh yeah, he's the starter. They'll give out that hint on who they like more. Kind of like what they did with Ty Simpson last year.
Yeah. It kind of felt obvious to me that Simpson was going to get it just because he had been in the program for a while and kind of understood what everybody was looking for on staff. But I guess there's only what, 2 others of note in terms of quarterback competitions. Of course, Tennessee is in the midst of one right now with George McIntyre and Faison Brandon. Kind of similar to Alabama's just in terms of 2 guys that hadn't played much college football. In fact, unlike Alabama, they've got a true freshman involved in Faison Brandon. And if you really want to throw him in there, Ryan Staub. We did hear from him the other week. He seems happy to be there. Also said that Tennessee was the most professional place he had ever been, which could be looked at as a backhanded shot, or not even backhanded, just a shot at Colorado and what's going on there with Deion Sanders and the staff. But from what we've heard, Faison Brandon is the most athletic specimen of the 3 of them. Seems very college ready and certainly not a guy you want to rule out going against George McIntyre. And George, of course, has a little bit of a leg up just because he's been in the system for a little bit. But I think part of it is, can he execute what Heupel wants to be done in a more effective manner than Faison? I think Faison in particular is who he's going at it with, and 2, and I think he'll get there just with the new strength and conditioning staff, but the weight is a little bit of a problem with him because he's so skinny. He came in at 180 out of high school, and he's still not even to his target weight yet. He'll get there, but that's another one that's taken the SEC by storm just in terms of key position battles. I guess the only other one that is kind of a battle right now, and I don't know. I'd love to hear an Arkansas person's perspective on this, but the battle between KJ Jackson and AJ Hill, I believe, the former Memphis backup.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to see whether Arkansas will get close to having a winning season this year, because it is not looking like it this year.
No, and I think there's some optimism around Ryan Silverfield. There's not anywhere near what I feel like there is with some of these other coaching hires at this point. Now, I'll say this about KJ Jackson. What I saw from him in the Texas game, I actually liked. Not that they were going to be able to come back and win that game after Taylor Green went down, but I think you at least saw some things there that you say, hey, we can maybe build off of this next season. But, the familiarity with AJ Hill and the coaching staff coming over from Memphis, is that an area they want to lean on? I guess would be the question there. But I feel like those are your biggest quarterback competitions at the moment. And of course, Andrew mentioned the new coaches in general in this league or the teams with new coaches in general in this league as teams to watch out for in this spring football season. I'll tell you one that's intriguing me, not just in spring football, but also just in general this offseason on the recruiting trail in particular is Kentucky.
Ooh. Yeah, Kentucky's looking like they want to be the next Indiana of college football.
Yeah, they're trying it. We'll see how Kenny Minchie works out, but they've made a concerted effort to get guys out of the portal, and you're starting to see more and more recruits get interested in the staff as well. I know there's a kid from the Nashville area, Andre Adams, who's had a pretty serious look at them, and there's a handful of other quarterbacks that have as well in the class of 2027, but they're trying to make strong impressions on kids who were not previously interested in Kentucky. And I mean, beforehand, why would most of these people be interested in Kentucky? It's all about this effort to try and revamp that offense a little bit, make it a more fun brand of football than what it was in those last years under Stoops.
True. But, you did a story on a young man who's the number one QB of 2027. And they say he's going to be making his announcement on April 25th.
They think.
Between Alabama, Auburn, Florida, and Georgia. Young man's name is Elijah Haven.
Yes. There's a lot of people hyping this one up. Hyping up this potential quarterback signing. It's Alabama, Auburn, it's Georgia, and Florida, correct? On that one?
Oh, yeah.
I'm interested with Bama because they've already got the one quarterback commitment. Is it Seaborn?
Mm-hmm.
That's committed there already?
Yep.
Yeah. And then all the other three are still looking for quarterbacks at this point. I guess it's just a matter of where he wants to or where he feels like he can get the best development. Georgia, you have to think, is at least a little bit of a factor there. If I'm not mistaken, he's from Louisiana, so that's a guy that I'm a little surprised LSU.
Don't let Lane Kiffin know.
No, Lane's specialty is portal guys, though, which on the note of spring storylines, that is kind of interesting to see what will happen this spring. Like they're not really doing that much with Sam Levitt. It doesn't sound like, just because he's still rehabbing from that injury.
Man. But yeah, it's just pretty amazing to see what's going to happen. Like if April 25th is looking like the date, then it looks like we've got a recruiting watch party to plan right here at the Voice College Football Network.
Yeah. Sadly, I will not be there, but just because Tennessee's in no way involved. Tennessee already has its quarterback. They went way under the radar in the class of 2027. Also wrote a story on that elsewhere on Vols Wire.
Oh, man. I'll tell you this, though. Like, one question. Do we have any other stories we want to cover for tonight? Or
Yeah, but there's a couple others we can look at. This Byram Brown throwing motion conundrum is interesting because a lot of, and I guess technically we are some of them, but a lot of what some people refer to as armchair quarterbacks have been criticizing it. The guy was obviously productive at a high level at USF, so I don't think we should question his throwing motion that much. But I've seen a lot of people online who have not been happy about it or have been critical of it.
Well, I mean, it's like maybe Byram Brown can bring some he can be able to continue some of that magic at Auburn, but
maybe
just kind of like do that same magic you did against Florida, like you did with South Florida.
Potentially.
Oh yeah. Just be glad that, well, maybe Brandon Bett will behave himself on September 19th and not give out the hot Tua like he did last year against South Florida.
Yeah. Don't want to have that happen.
No. That's just so bad right there. But what is good is that our teams are in the Sweet 16. Like Tennessee making a surprise run to the Sweet 16. Like amazing right there. Like magical upset over Virginia. And Alabama crossing their fingers, hoping they can beat Michigan, but we'll definitely wait and see. Arkansas has Arizona, which, I mean, I kind of feel like Arizona's like Wile E. Coyote. They're going to fall off the cliff trying to chase the Roadrunner because They're in March Madness in the postseason. They fall apart. But then we got Texas going against the Purdue Boilermakers. I believe that's going to be if I'm correct,
it's the lowest seeded team.
Man, that's the first
the
game of the
SEC.
Sweet 16. It's just wild. Just completely wild right there.
Yeah, you got 4 SEC teams in the Sweet 16. I would have said there would probably be 3, probably have been 3 teams that made it into the Sweet 16 this year before this thing started. I would have said Florida for sure is getting in there. They, of course, did not. But it does create an interesting game between Iowa and Nebraska in the Sweet 16, something we've never seen before, which is kind of a fascinating rivalry game. As for the SEC teams this weekend, and I think we can get into this a little bit, I don't know which one. Well, I do know which one I like to go the furthest out of all of them. Which one I think could potentially make the Final Four. It's not Tennessee, by the way. It's Arkansas.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the reason I say that is Arizona. It's not the whole choking before you get to the Final Four thing. They're a very well-rounded basketball team. I just don't know if, they'll be able to slow down the firepower of Arkansas offensively. Very few SEC teams were able to do that this year. Not that there are a ton of great defenses in the SEC, but they're consistently scoring over 80 points. They very nearly scored 100 in regulation on Alabama. I know they scored 100 in regulation against Texas. Tennessee, who is, I think, still the best defensive team in the league this year, I think they scored 86 on Tennessee, too. They pulled away in the final couple minutes. It's a close game for most of the way, but the final few minutes, they just pulled away and got well over 80. But I like Arkansas there just because they have so much firepower offensively. Now, their lack of intensity on the defensive end is something that I think could catch up to them. But that's the team that I think can make the Final Four of the 4 teams in the SEC. Looking around Texas, it was fun. It was a fun run for them. I don't think they're going to be able to get through Purdue.
No.
It's kind of interesting with the whole Camden Heide reunion with Texas and Purdue meeting each other, though, just because he transferred from Purdue to Texas. They get through NC State in the first 4. We need to come back to that in just a second, by the way. BYU and then Gonzaga in the first weekend. Win 3 games in 5 days. So you get through them. They're a very streaky team, have been all season, kind of an up and down regular season. You go one and done in the SEC tournament. I just look at their 2 guards, Jordan Pope and Tremont Mark, and I just see 2 of the streakiest players in the SEC, have been for a couple years. They were like that under Rodney Terry too. But they can be potent at times. It's just a matter of whether or not they can bring it this weekend. As for the other region that still involves SEC teams, that is, of course, Tennessee and Alabama's region.
Yeah.
Because there is a chance that they play each other in the Elite Eight for a spot in the Final Four, which is insane to think about. I don't think it'll happen, but it's insane to think
I want
about.
it to happen.
A lot of people want it to happen. It would be the death of one fan base if the other team were to win against them to get into the Final Four. I have a feeling. But I look at the matchups between Tennessee and Iowa State and Michigan and Alabama. Tennessee and Iowa State are both very similar philosophies. I think both very good defensive teams. I wouldn't be surprised if it's like a 1st to 65 type game.
True.
Just between the 2 of them. I do think Iowa State's a better put together roster. They're a much better 3-point shooting team than Tennessee. Tennessee's only 3-point option most of the season's been Jacoby Gillespie. Although Bishop Boswell did help out a lot in the win over Virginia. And by all accounts, this has been a fine season for Rick Barnes. Underachieved a little bit in the regular season, blew a few too many games and got you down to a 6th seed. But you're in the Sweet 16 for a 4th straight season. That's something to be proud of. And, I think regardless of what happens Friday, you call it a good year. The one thing that I think could help Tennessee a little bit, and we'll see if it happens or not, but Josh Jefferson is still TBD in terms of his status for Friday. And if Iowa State doesn't have him, I at least think the door is somewhat open for Tennessee. I already think it's somewhat open for Tennessee, but I would not count on Tennessee winning this game at all. And then you got Michigan and Alabama.
Oof.
I think
Alabama has just been up and down this season. And, it's like, I want to believe that 2026 is kind of like 2024 in a way where it's just like up and down in the regular season. Although the downfall is you're overly reliant on the 3-pointer. And, like you lost in the quarterfinals of the SEC tournament, but, you pulled off a miraculous run, got to the Final Four. Maybe this year is different. I don't know, but it's like I'm hoping Alabama can continue to be good in the rebounding game against Michigan, because that Michigan team is like a death squad right there going against Bama.
Yeah, they're the Monstars of college basketball this year for sure. I don't see a way around it for Alabama. And you're right about the 3-point shooting for Alabama. They will find a way to hit several threes on Michigan, I'm sure. But I just look at Michigan, top to bottom, it is the strongest starting lineup in all of college basketball, I believe. Because you look around, you got Yaxel Lindeborg, who I'm sure some Alabama folks are familiar with from his time at UAB, who's just a unicorn of a 6'9" guy. He's got the body of a forward with the handles of a guard and all the skills needed for both of those spots. So truly an impressive player for Michigan and a guy that's going to go high in the NBA drafts this summer. And then I look at the rest of those guys. Ademara, Tennessee saw him when he played for UCLA last year. Of course, Tennessee won that game in the round of 32. And I just remember him having a terrific first half, and then for some reason, Mick Cronin just didn't play him in the second half. Not because he was in foul trouble, just didn't play him. And I was like, what is he doing? Ademara is a terrific player that's just wasting away on the bench over there. And sure enough, he transfers to Michigan, and Dusty May is maximizing his potential this season. So doing really well there. Trying to think, who else am I missing in that starting lineup? Elliot Cadeau is a terrific facilitator. Namari Burnett is an interesting wrinkle in this matchup just because of the fact that he played at Alabama at one point, was a contributor on that Brandon Miller team from 3 years ago. And then there's one more that I am who's escaping me right now. Morez Johnson, the former Illinois player, terrific rebounder and rim protector. Not that you need more rim protection with Ademara in there. And I know Max said last week, Max Barr from Southeastern 16, that the LJ Kaysen injury could hamper them a little bit. I just look at that starting lineup, and I don't see many teams getting around that. There may be somebody in the Final Four that's capable of it, but an Alabama team that is 3-point shot oriented, and I mean, no offense to Aiden Sherrill, and he'll be better for it next year, but this has been a challenging season for him because he's essentially all Alabama's got in the interior.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I'm hoping we could see Phylon, made some great shots, and I want to see everybody on that squad. Like, I want to see Wright-Sell, like, just kind of continue the magic he's been making. Like, I want to see all those guys just continue to make the magic they made against, like, Texas Tech. I mean, like, 19 3-pointers. That was nuts in of itself.
I had Texas Tech winning that game just because of the whole Aiden Holloway thing. And I just figured, even though JT Toppin is not there, it would just be a shooting contest between the two. Was a bad decision. Alabama came out and pummeled them.
Oh, man. That was basically a Genjitsu Sunday night right there.
Yeah. Beat them by more than they beat Hofstra the other night. They still beat Hofstra by 20.
Yeah. It's nuts. But I would love it, though. But,
I guess well, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, get through Michigan. You can get through anything, and you're home free at this point if you're Bama.
I guess one other SEC basketball thing we do need to discuss just because it's trending today, and we can workshop, I guess, next week for this if it indeed happens. But you've seen what's been developing between Raleigh and Baton Rouge today, haven't you?
Like Will Wade could come back to LSU. Like,
yeah. So Matt McMahon has not been fired by LSU. There's not been a statement saying that we're sticking with him through the offseason either. Which,
Man.
I mean, it's not like a requirement or anything for an AD to put that statement out. But there is some serious discussion, and now we're starting to see national folks like Pete Nakos of On3 start to report that, hey, LSU is finalizing a deal to hire McNeese as athletic director and an advisory role as something that could lure Will Wade back to Baton Rouge. And the LSU is kind of playing chess, not checkers here, because they know that I read from somebody that today's March 25th. All this stuff is coming out now. I know there were rumors swirling around earlier, but now it's all starting to sound a little bit more official. April 1st is when Matt McMahon's buyout takes a pretty steep fall off, and they can get rid of him for cheaper in order to bring in Will Wade.
Oh.
And essentially what you'd be doing there, it's like the college basketball version of what Miami did with Mario Cristobal and getting rid of Manny Diaz.
Exactly what that feels like. Miami, when they were saying, we're not keeping Manny Diaz, but we're not saying he's fired. Mario, what do you say? I say I want to come back to Miami, Florida. Okay, sounds good. Bye-bye. Okay, Manny, you're fired. Out.
Yeah. All kinds of interesting theories around what's the situation down there at LSU. And I saw somebody say something to the effect of, well, they had hired Scott Woodward while Will Wade was still there. And this is when things were kind of going into the gutter with Coach O, like right after Woodward got there. And from what I saw, and again, don't believe everything you see, but it makes sense if you connect the dots. Woodward kind of used the NCAA investigation to reopen that investigation as a way to scapegoat Will Wade in order to try and save some money at the time. And they brought in Matt McMahon instead, just to kind of get that, monkey off your back, so to speak.
Man.
Then, of course, they brought in Brian Kelly, and those around, I think the president and maybe Jeff Landry at the time were not too happy with the move. And then, of course, the Brian Kelly thing doesn't work out. They fire Brian Kelly. Scott Woodward gets fired by Jeff Landry, essentially, from his job. And then, of course, you have this whole regime change with Verge Osbury and Will Wade, or not Will Wade, Lane Kiffin, but, potentially soon to be Will Wade. And the first time the rumors began to really percolate, I think, was back in February, that LSU may be interested in getting Will Wade back to Baton Rouge, because, I mean, you got to think about it. The stuff he got caught on the wire tapping incident for, it's all legal now. Like you can offer these guys money out of high school to come and play for you. It's not a problem. The rumors began percolating in February. NC State conveniently fell off in February in basketball.
Man.
So again, you connect all the dots here, and it begins to make sense. So it very much looks like Will Wade is about to head back to the Bayou here in the next week or so.
Are we going to see Marty Smith just staying up for 48 hours outside the building like we did with Lane Kiffin, or no?
Probably not. I don't think it's that big of a deal, but imagine the combo of Lane Kiffin and Will Wade on one campus.
Oh, God. That's just going to be a shit show in of itself. Like,
that's the LSU way.
Man, it's like, can they go through one day without drama? I swear it feels like they can't. It's just that whole athletic program is just a mess.
Yeah, it's bad, really bad. What's going on there?
I mean, it's like you have your governor tell you that your athletic director's got to go. Your state governor, which, I mean, he should focus more on, like, starving kids in the school lunchroom. Like, I mean, that's more of a priority than an athletic director who's like, hey, I'm not getting fired till I get this amount. Be like, You can go to the back of the room later. Right now, we got the kids.
Yeah.
It's like, what a mess. What a mess in Baton Rouge. It's just,
No standards.
I don't even know what to say. I mean, it's like, oh, well, wait, you're fired. Oh, we want you back. It's like, good grief. That they just can't go through a day without drama.
No.
No. But of course, there's magic coming the way from each of us, Tucker Harlan and myself, all right here on SEC at the Voice College Football Wednesday nights, as Andrew, Tucker, and myself bring you all kinds of wonderful guests, all right here, 7 p.m. Central Time, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. But we also got some other stuff on the other team channels, like the Tennessee channel and the Alabama channel. But before we sign off for the night, Tucker, what magic have you got cooking on Balls Wire, SI and HQ, and Tennessee at the Voice College Football? Your 1-year anniversary is coming up at Tennessee at the Voice College Football, by the way. Congratulations.
Thank you, Jackson. And we just celebrated our 50th show the other night. That's big. That's a big accomplishment for us there, myself and Jordan Binkley. Talking more spring football over there on Tennessee at the Voice of College Football every Monday night. Got new clips rolling out all week long. Keeping our eyes on the recruiting trail as well. Potential commitment tomorrow for Tennessee. Jaden Butler from Brownsville, Tennessee. He's a 3-star, but he's a 2-way player for Haywood High School out there in Brownsville, Tennessee. Potential commitment coming Tennessee's way. And if Tennessee gets him, Jordan and I will have an extensive breakdown on that next week on our show, and you can read about it on Vols Wire as well. I will have a piece out on that. So we got all that cooking up. We're following everything on the recruiting trail on Vols Wire. Of course, baseball season's starting up in the tail end of basketball season still over there. Looking around at CFBHQ, it's spring football season, so there is content there. It's not as readily available as it is in the fall, but we're going to get there. It's the challenging part of the off season, but we do still have plenty of content rolling out there just about everything going on in the national college football landscape. And then there's one other thing I was going to mention. Oh yeah. MLB starting up. I will be rolling out weekly stats pieces on former Tennessee players in MLB, just compiling their totals from each week. As a matter of fact, right after this, I'm about to go upstairs and watch Tony Vitello's MLB managerial debut. It is underway on Netflix. So Dan Harrelson, my coworker over there at Vols Wire, our lead publisher, he's been constantly tracking this stuff. He will probably have daily info on what the San Francisco Giants are doing. So if you're a Tennessee fan or just an SEC baseball fan who hate watching Tony Vitello, be sure and check out Dan's pieces on volswire.com.
Well, there you go. Tell your friends, your family, and the cashiers at Publix about the magic that Tucker has all over the place on CFBHQ, on SI, Vols Wire at USA Today, and Tennessee at the Voice College Football, where they have got past 1,000 subs. Let's get our boys at Tennessee at the Voice College Football to 1,500 subs and the 2,000 subs all right there. And, of course, you can check me out Mondays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays on Alabama at the Voice College Football, where I star alongside with Trevion Ware and Jeffrey Only Talk Sports, especially tomorrow night on the Alabama College Show, as Jeffrey and I take your calls on the Crimson Tide, discussing the final preview of Alabama-Michigan, a little bit of Pro Day, and much more, all right there. And you can also check me out right here on SEC at the Voice College Football. And for more updates, what I've got going on SEC at the Voice College Football, Alabama at the Voice College Football, the Jacksonian, and twice week appearances on Locked On West Virginia with Mountaineer Paul, as we discussed the Mountaineers on West Virginia, all right there. And some articles on the Voice College Football website.com, where I'm posting stories on some of the shows all right here on the Voice College Football Network. And we will be seeing you soon. And like, comment, subscribe, click on the notification bell so you never miss another video or episode whatsoever. And we will catch you next Wednesday. Good night, everybody.